The dorm smelled faintly of bleach and dust when Daniel unlocked the door. Everett Hall had a reputation. Built in the 1950s, it was the oldest dorm still in use at Halstead University. The administration claimed it was historic, but everyone else just called it creepy. Its paint peeled in flakes, the walls buzzed with bad wiring, and the rumors. Well, the rumor said Everett was the kind of place you didn't want to be assigned if you cared about sleep. Daniel hadn't been lucky. He shoved the key into the lock, pushed, and the heavy door groaned like it was alive. The fluorescent bulb inside hummed weakly. That was when he saw it. The bed by the window wasn't empty. Someone was already there. A young man sat cross-legged on the mattress, facing the wall. His posture was too stiff. His head tilted slightly, as though listening to something Daniel couldn't hear. For a second, Daniel froze in the doorway. Then the figure turned. "Hey," the roommate said quietly, voice calm, almost rehearsed. His eyes were dark, so dark they barely caught the light. "You must be Daniel." Daniel forced a smile. Yeah, must be. Evan, right? From the housing site." "That's me." The young man's smile was polite but thin, as if his face wasn't used to the movement. "Been here a little while. Wanted to settle in." Daniel carried his box inside, trying not to stare. The first thing he noticed was the duffel bag, frayed at the seams, worn as though it had traveled decades. Then the books, stacked neatly on Evan's desk, covers faded and spines cracked, titles he didn't recognize. And when Evan pulled the blinds open, the sunlight fell strangely on his skin, making him look both sharp and faded at once. Weird, Daniel thought. But college was full of weird people. That night, he lay in bed scrolling his phone while Evan sat across the room, perfectly upright, reading one of those yellowed paperbacks. The silence was thick. Thick. "Hey," Daniel said finally. "So, where you from?" Evan didn't look up. "Not far. Just around." "Cool. What's your major?" "Oz." "Then, history." Daniel nodded, though something about the answer felt off. He set his phone down and tried to drift to sleep. That's when Evan's voice came again, soft, deliberate. "You shouldn't keep your bed against that wall." Daniel cracked one eye open. "What?" Evan's face was shadowed, unreadable. "Bad things happened here. People don't sleep well against that wall." Over the next week, Daniel tried to ignore the strange vibe. But it wasn't easy. Evan was off. He didn't go to class. Not once. Daniel never saw him leave for a lecture. Never saw him carrying notebooks or a laptop. He barely ate. Sometimes he'd have an apple, sometimes nothing at all. He never used his phone. Not to text, not to scroll, not to even check the time. But the worst part was the night. Evan barely slept. Daniel would wake at 3 or 4 a.m. to see him sitting upright, staring at the wall, eyes wide open. When Daniel asked if he was okay, Evan would just smile faintly and say, "You were dreaming again." The way he said it made Daniel's skin crawl. It was a Thursday night when Daniel decided to dig a little deeper. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, so when Evan left the room, quietly without a word, Daniel checked his desk. The books were stranger than he thought. Water damaged. And inside, the inscriptions weren't new either. Dates written in looping cursive. 1974, 1982, 1991. And then, tucked inside one book, a folded newspaper clipping. Daniel unfolded it with trembling fingers. The headline read, "Halstead student dies in Everett Hall accident." The photo was grainy, but unmistakable. It was Evan. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Had to be a joke. Sick prank. Maybe Evan had a twin. Maybe the clipping wasn't real. That night, when Evan returned, Daniel forced himself to act normal. "Hey, when did you say you graduated high school?" Evan looked up slowly. "A while ago." Daniel swallowed. "Like what year?" There was a pause too long. Then softly, 1993. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. From then on, things got worse. Daniel woke to whispers. Not from outside, not from his phone, inside the room. Words he couldn't make out, muttered right next to his ear. When he sat up, Evan was always awake, watching him. His reflection in the dorm mirror began to look wrong. Not always, but sometimes. His reflection lagged, blinking a beat too late. And in those off moments, Daniel swore he saw Evan's figure standing just behind him. Other students avoided room 306. Friends stopped dropping by. Even the RA, usually friendly, grew distant when Daniel asked about Everett's history. Finally, he cornered her. Did something happen in this building? Something with a student named Evan. The RA's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about, she muttered before hurrying away. But Daniel had seen it in her eyes. She knew. He spent the weekend in the library, digging through old archives. It didn't take long to find the full story. Evan Turner, sophomore, history major, died in Everett Hall, room 306, nearly 30 years ago. The official report said accident, but the details were vague. Fall, a seizure. Some said suicide. Others whispered murder. What stuck with Daniel most was the note from a roommate at the time. He was always awake, watching, whispering. The words made Daniel's blood run cold. When he returned to the room that night, Evan was waiting. Find what you were looking for? He asked softly. Daniel didn't answer. He crawled into bed, pulling the covers tight. His heart pounded as he felt Evan's gaze heavy in the dark. Hours passed. Then a whisper right by his ear. You don't have to be afraid of me. Not anymore. Daniel snapped upright. Evan was inches away from his bed, crouched low, eyes wide and unblinking. His skin seemed thinner now, almost translucent, veins spiderwebbing faintly beneath. You could stay here, Evan whispered. Forever. We'd never have to be alone again. Daniel bolted, fumbling for the door, but the knob wouldn't turn. Evan's hand, icy and cold, closed over his wrist. The room spun. The shadows deepened. And in that suffocating darkness, Daniel heard the whispers rise again. Not from Evan, but from the walls themselves, countless voices whispering in unison. Stay. Daniel woke up on the floor, gasping. Morning sunlight spilled through the blinds. Evan was gone. For a moment, Daniel thought he'd dreamed it all. But then he looked in the mirror. His reflection blinked, one beat too late. And behind him, in the faint glare of the glass, Evan smiled. If you enjoyed this story, you've only scratched the surface of what lurks in the shadows. There are more whispers, more mysteries, more tales that will crawl under your skin and stay with you long after the lights go out. Subscribe to Shadows and Stories, and step deeper into the darkness, where every story hides a truth you were never meant to hear.